Prana, energy, juice. We all want more of it, and many of us complain that we don't have enough. Well, what does yoga have to say about that vitality, the life force that courses through our being, that permeates everything? Well, quite a lot. Actually, the whole purpose and practice of yoga is designed to cultivate, enhance, build, rise up our energy for what? For inner peace and peace in the world around us. Jai Atmeshwar, welcome back to the channel. I'm David, the founder of Kailash Ashram. I was a sniper, I gave that up, and now I run a traditional meditation and yoga retreat in the Grampians. On this channel, we love to share ancient wisdom made relevant for modern times. We speak to different themes that our members ask us to each week in our live session. If you're interested in joining the live session, be sure to check out the description, and whilst you're at it, smash that like button. The algorithm loves it. Bonus karma points if you hit subscribe. Prana is one of those elusive words that can be translated in a variety of different ways. Often it gets the equivalents drawn, chi or energy, life force, vitality, sometimes breath. And yeah, I thought I'd approach it from two kind of distinct angles this evening, regarding how we build our prana and also how the different yogic practices utilize and cultivate and harness and build that energy. So speaking from the Hatha yoga perspective, where we're utilizing the body and the mind to cultivate that life force for the purpose of our deeper contemplation on the mystery of being. As I've shared in the past, Hatha yoga is a complete practice in and of itself. It does have multiple limbs depending on which system you come from. And there's no ignoring the fact that, beyond basic poses or asana, one will encounter this thing called your life force, your energy. So it might not be enough, i.e. like you might be looking at your prana in detriment, i.e. I don't have enough energy that I want, i.e. you wake up early in the morning and you're like, I don't have the juice to go for the practice. Or it might be something that the practice, it helps you feel a sense of vitality, a sense of alertness, a sense of well-being after engaging in, a basic sequence. You might be more energized than when you went in. So prana is measurable through the faculty of our direct internal experience. We don't measure energy in the way of necessarily, the scientific method of calories in versus calories out. And prana is something that begins as a cultivation across the gross physical structure. So where we utilize the breath and the respiration to give us a bit of juice for some more, gymnastically oriented practices that free the body from restrictions, that enable the more subtle work to happen. So on the Hatha yoga path, for many, often the first good bit of time, there's quite a lot of grunt work in, removing the patterns and the imprints of the body that often working life or childhood development, certainly me carrying heavy packs in the army and trudging around or sitting at the computer as an architect, these leave an imprint, an energetic imprint on the body. And the first exposure to prana that you can get is more in a kind of extreme, or not extreme, but more in a, you're working it. That carries you until a point. The point that it's meant to carry to you for Hatha yoga is to the correct sequence of seats or asana for deeper internal practice to begin. And this is where pranayama can enter, the extension yama of prana, of life force. So often it's called breath control or breath work. It doesn't really mean that. It's not quite the same thing. And so the different modes of pranayama are given commensurate with where the student's at, and I have by no means exhausted all of them. A lot of the types of pranayama given in a more curative sense. They're given to fix specific imbalances or ailments, whereas other practices are given to elicit states of internal meditation. In the Hatha Yoga practice, we utilize mantra, and this is where mantra comes in as something that is able to what would you say? The mantra itself guides the energy. So the nature of prana is that it's ever moving, it's not still. And when we go to sit down to meditate, we're obviously endeavoring to be still. We're trying to resist the temptation to move. We're trying to resist the tendency of that prana to want to get up and go and do a bunch of different things. So restraint happens with firm resolve, i.e. you make an intention to sit still. But then in the Hatha Yogic perspective, we utilize specific mantra, not just mental recitation, where we're saying the mantra in the mind, for instance. The mantras themselves begin to be chanted, including parts of the body. And so as the mind and attention are taken to different places in the body, the energy follows that mantra. Okay, so one of the things about our prana is that the way that we direct it is through the faculty of the mind. Now in Hatha Yoga, through the system of the Yogini Nyasa Vidhim, which is the science of the placement of sound through touch, we place the mind as well as mantra in specific locations to different meditative effect, and they elicit a reduction in the need for external respiration. So it's almost as if, as we sit here, this impulse to breathe is governed largely by unconscious processes. Most of us, until I've just pointed it out right now, aren't exactly aware of how we're breathing. We might just be unconsciously shallow in our respiration, or we might be, now that I'm talking about it, you're concentrating, drawing the breath to the khanda or something like that. So for many of you on retreat, you will have been given one place to draw the energy to the khandasthana, which is your power base. And if you can just draw the breath to there, well, how do you actually draw your breath to there? You place your mind there first and then draw the energy down. So, you've already been given pranayam, but most people think, it's just something that he told me to put my mind there and I breathe and that's it. Well, when you subtly shift the places of awareness for the breath, different things begin to happen. And really it's up to us as the yogins, the people walking the path of yoga, to examine what sorts of changes happen in the body and what sort of changes happen in the mind itself. Now, my mind, when it's given a task, it's happier. My mind does not like doing nothing. That's why this Samarpan Dhyan or the Himalayan meditation is so challenging, because the mission to do nothing for the mind is very confronting, because the mind loves prana. And so here it's like we're giving the dog a job, and the dog is happy whilst it's got its job, and it'll eventually tire itself out. And so the Hatha Yoga perspective, we utilize the bodily cultivation in conjunction with the application of mind to build prana. Now, as we build that power and that energy, it's like a well-burning fire inside of us. There's less requirement to, the energy shifts from often, a fatigued mind likes distraction and restlessness, which is why people spend a lot of time scrolling on stuff. That's a sign of an agitated mind. The nature of the mind, when it is given a large amount of prana, is that it's kind of satisfied. It actually feels at rest because it's got what it wanted, which was a bit of extra juice. And so that's the sort of microcosm of the Hatha Yoga practice, where your attention starts with prana in the physical body, and then it begins to be worked onto the subtle body, i.e. sound and mantra. And so that subtle body exists inside of the mind. and you know, it provides a pathway for additional meditation or additional meditative style activities that pacify the being. They have a net benefit on the person doing them. Like, you go through those processes and you're like, oh, okay, that feels like something. It's also, you know, it takes some work. It takes some application of time over a period to learn a lot of these systems, and also to prepare the body for these practices. For instance, Sundarnath won't take somebody to teach pranayama to unless they can sit in Padmasana, in lotus, for a long time, for, you know, a good bit of time. And so, you know, for many people, myself included, that meant 12 years. Not that I was gunning to be able to sit in Padmasana, but I spent 12 years doing a very, you know, a sun salutation form or thereabouts, a couple of variations of those, until the physical structure was ready for those advanced practices. What happens if you chuck a huge amount of electricity into a poorly wired building? You can burn the house down. And so, you know, some of these practices that really do jack your prana up, like, you know, I'm not speaking disparagingly, but like Wim Hof method, you know, like this kind of very deep hyperventilation for a few minutes and then holding the breath for a long time, will jack your prana right up. The danger is, if you don't have the physical structure and the psychic structure to be able to carry that, the influx of energy can kind of melt a few wires. So, you know, the Hatha Yoga tradition is very, you know, it's gentle, it's personal guidance once we start getting into those realms. So that's more about the physical cultivation of prana, but what about this beautiful practice of Samarpan Dhyan and the yoga of being alive? For me, the Samarpan Dhyan path is very much around turning every waking moment into your yogic practice. That's the real sort of spiritual journey that you're on, that I'm on, that you're on. And in this path, we offer first 30 minutes of seated dhyan, of giving up of one's attention to the Supreme. And so where is that energy directed? Well, if you're sat there for 30 minutes directing that energy to your sense modalities, it's probably aimed. The mind is aimed down. The organs of action and perception, you know, for all of the different chakras correlate obviously to the 5 sensory functions. When we direct the mind in that practice above to whatever you believe in. Now, if you're a devotee of Christ, it might be Jesus. Rajni and I might put our attention on Swamiji or God or Shiva. It might be a particular deity. It might be some supreme or transcendent aspect of life that is resonant with you. When your attention goes on to that, where is your energy being directed? Well, it's being directed to the soul. So, what happens when we direct the energy directly to the soul? Not through mantra, not through the mind, not into the body. That was Hatha Yoga. Samarpan Dhyan, we're shooting it upwards. Well, we begin to... The principle of prana is that wherever your prana is directed, that's the thing that will grow. So if you put your prana on different places into the subtle body through Hatha Yoga practice, you build a stronger subtle body. And so you're able to breathe with less air. You're able to retain the mind dissolved through the body. Samarpan Dhyan, we're putting all of that energy into that highest part of us called the soul. Well, just like if we direct the hose, the tap, we've got a hose in the garden, you know, we direct that hose towards the thing that we want to water, and then the water goes out and it isn't the same thing as the hose. Our chitta, or awareness, the seat of consciousness, is what we aim, and the prana is that water that flows, that consciousness that flows onto the object of that we're pointing the hose at. What happens is, as a consequence, Shakti or power is built. And so we are giving a good, nice daily soaking to our soul when we sit for that dhyan or meditation, you know, putting the attention beyond. When that starts growing into something a bit bigger than a seed, what that soul then does for us is it turns the 23 and a half hours of the day that we're not meditating into a vitally important part of your life. Like that's the crux of where you're going to either attain enlightenment or not. And so with a large sense of soul accompanying you everywhere, that's that nagging part of you that pushes forward what? The sanskar, or the universal human values, to come up from within. So you might catch yourself being resentful for some sort of situation, and then because of you've given your prana or energy into the soul is that bit that goes, oh, really? We're holding resentment against that person. And you sit there as the victim of the soul in that circumstance, and you're like, oh, shit, I know what I've got to do. I need to forgive, or I need to let go. So, it's no wonder that a lot of people get terrified the second that the soul starts getting a bit bigger. The thing that was feeding the soul is the Samarpan Dhyan. And so as the soul gets bigger, if we're not willing to make those life adjustments to live in alignment with what it says, guess what goes? The meditation. Why? Because people can't stand their prana going into that voice of conscience within. Because how much do they actually want enlightenment? How much do people actually want to be free? And a lot of the time, people talk big and then don't show up, because freedom is much, much, much humbler than what perhaps we think of when we start out upon the spiritual journey, thinking that there's going to be untold spiritual riches waiting for us if we just meditate long enough. That, my fantasies are like levitation, or like being able to like kind of see pretty lights and colors and all of these kind of very childish things. I can admit that I have those kinds of silly kind of egoic constructions of what a more enlightened perspective might be. But the reality is, what I've experienced is that true wisdom is a lot more humble. It's admitting that I don't know what the hell is going on, for a start, and then following that up with, a care and a concern and a love for my fellow human beings, rather than a sense of superiority or spiritual grandiosity or something like that, which can easily happen if the prana is directed to the ego. And so I'm sure, we know plenty of people whose energy and attention goes towards their egoic concerns, and as a consequence, that's the part of them that grows. Hidden inside of the word prana is an indication for exactly what I'm talking about. So when we break prana down, pra means, to go forward or forward. Ana means to bow down. And na, if we just take the na at the end, it means it's one of the names of Shiva, that which isn't, the absent one, which is consciousness. And so prana can also mean that forward momentum of bowing down to consciousness, which is interesting, that the nature of our energy wants to bow to consciousness. And so this is the dynamic of Shiva and Shakti, or the masculine and feminine, where consciousness itself is kind of cornered by the snake, which is the serpent, which is Kundalini, which is Shakti. That's the feminine. And so, our role as a yogin or somebody upon the path is to allow that energy, or to bring ourselves into alignment with how that energy wants to be naturally. And according to the word prana, it naturally wants to be bowed down to consciousness. So this is how the prana is the energy that sustains the ascension of our awareness away from body consciousness, away from consciousness of mind, to rest in pure awareness. And so when we experience or taste consciousness or awareness resting in itself, then there is nothing that needs to be done because one has become consciousness. This is Shivoham, I am Shiva. The prana has actually pulled you all of the way where you're no different than Shiva. And so, well, what does Shiva need to do? Nothing. Does the Buddha need to meditate to become the Buddha? No, the Buddha just sits down, and if he wants to close his eyes, he closes his eyes. He's already attained Buddhahood. And so the yogic process of building our life energy, this prana, elicits the encounter of feeling at one with the Supreme. And so the Atman is experienced as inseparable from the Paramatma, or the universal consciousness. So the Jivatma, or individual soul, isn't taken as a separate thing. So you on the spiritual path doesn't even exist in that higher realm. There just is consciousness, and the objects that appear to consciousness are no longer there. There is just pure awareness. And so if you taste that for even a moment, it can be quite discombobulating, because the ego is long dead in those states, and one's awareness, it can be pretty far out going into that space, which is also why people are terrified of the practice of Samarpan Dhyan, because it's only the mind or the intellect that likes to kid itself that it's got a million things it needs to do before it experiences itself as consciousness. And so the quickest and most direct method to defeating that is making the firm resolve that you don't even need to do anything and you can just sit. And so, it starts out on that journey that we might feel that we're faking it a little bit. That it's been somebody else's inspiration. Like for me, Swamiji, his inspiration to get me to sit down, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm not one with nothing. I just feel like a freaking, the jungle of my mind is swallowing me right now. What do you mean I'm one with anything? And then one day you have the experience and you're like, wowzers, that appeared, that moment happened. And your faith in the practice will be built. More important than the feelings of oneness hidden inside of the Samarpan Dhyan meditation is the awareness of where you are directing your prana and your energy in your daily life. So you come out of the meditation and you get an increase in the resolution of agency. You get to choose. You become more aware that you can choose where your energy or where your attention and thus your energy goes. And so, if your attention, if you're finding yourself surrounded by people whom you don't agree with, and your attention is constantly with them, you're putting fertilizer onto the weeds, and your problems in life will just multiply. And similarly, if your attention is with the eternal things of life, the great triumphs of humanity, the great collective endeavors, the gratitude of having, the world around us, then we tend to become a person who sees gratefulness in more and more places. We're grateful for more and more things. Even so far, you can become grateful. Like if you keep playing the game of gratefulness by putting your prana, your attention, into thanks, one might also stumble across the place where you are thankful for your suffering. And that can be a real far out trip, because what was at the start of the journey, the thing that you wanted to get rid of, I want to be free from my suffering, towards the end of the journey becomes an object of love, and not from a cheesy, forced way, but a genuine thank you for my suffering, because it enables me to know whatever you know now as a consequence of it. And so, when people are at that place where they're trying to get rid of their suffering, we do teach them, come this way, we'll help you get rid of the suffering. But actually we know that the journey will be back to looking the suffering square in the eyes and bringing it in, not hiding from it. Because if we run from the suffering and then we're afraid to look at it, we're prisoners to it. And so if we told people that at the start of the journey, i.e. you're going to have to look long and hard into your suffering and then you'll go through it and you'll be thankful, people would probably not even begin upon the path. So, you know, it's funny. Shandor Sundarnath calls all of the promises of the riches and the beautiful things that yoga can get you the chocolate. And so it's spread throughout even, 1,500-year-old Sanskrit, yoga texts. They knew the same thing back then, but there was plenty of chocolate dangled through there, because that's the bits that everybody wants. Ooh, levitation. Yeah, I'd like to pick up levitation, or, freedom from suffering sounds great. But I think that those ancient masters had a little bit more nous and knew that in order to get free, one has to get exceedingly real. And treading that fine line between looking and not self-indulging or not dining out on one's own misery is a very, very delicate balance. The beautiful thing that is hidden inside of prana as a word is the devotional gesture. It's a gift, it's an offering. And so when all of our life's energies are an offering towards consciousness, i.e. Atman or soul, then that's kind of the fastest method there that I've come across, certainly. And what the Hatha Yoga tradition calls that is Amanaska yoga, or Amanaska samadhi, which is equanimity without mind, without body. It's the supreme kind of yoga, as opposed to what we started out at the start of the journey, talking about finding that equanimity and power inside of the body and mind. That is referred to as Samanaska yoga or Samanaska samadhi. Left hand, right hand. If you're a workaholic and you really want to kind of torture yourself, Samanaska is a great path, and I certainly practice that. Also the Amanaska, the Himalayan meditation, my belief is the crowning practice. And if you get that going in your life, if you get the yoga without mind, of pure awareness going in your life, all of those other practices that you wish to engage in, all of the other sadhana just becomes bonus. It's fun, it's fruit, it's nice. You're not looking towards those practices to attain the ultimate reality. You're just doing them because you love them. And so it helps to free up the agendas that we might go into any sort of practice with. So, perhaps this week you may introspect on where your attention is going. Do you want your fertilizer? Do you want the water out of the hose going onto the weeds? That could be the negativity. That could be the people that pull you down. It could be those places that leave you, feeling frustrated at the world. Or do you want to invest a little bit more of your attention first within through the meditation, and then perhaps into those sources that lift you up and make you feel more buoyant? As I say that, this is my reminder for the week to get my get my awareness onto those people that lift me up. And tonight, that's all your smiling faces. Well, I trust that tonight's sharing has inspired you to sit for meditation. Yes, each week we sit live as a group. If you're interested in learning the same practice that we sit with, please make sure you check the description. There's some links to get you started. Also, if you'd love to join me in person out here doing this stuff for real, in retreat in our beautiful yurt, our Yagyashala and Yogashala here, please check the description. Also, I've created this playlist to get you started with more of our ashram's teachings so that you can live your happiest self. Jai Atmeshwar, bye for now.